everyone, it's daytime. You can call me Buster, and welcome to attempting to ruin the standard ladder by forcing Fog of War with Penny. That's right, we're going to be doing something fun. So, for those of you unaware, I will be playing Penny in all of my standard ranked matches. This is ranked on TinyWars, and the reason why this works at all is because when Penny uses her CO power, she can randomly change the weather for 3 turns. Now, one of those weather conditions is rain, and rain forces Fog of War, even in standard. So that's what I've been going for here. I really like Penny. She's just a fun CO in general to play. So yeah, I wanted to try her. And the other 2 weather conditions are snow, which slows down your opponent's units, and sandstorm, which reduces their firepower by 30%, which is by far the strongest one, but not what we're going for in this series. So, my opponent is, and forgive me if I mispronounce this, Powan? I'm gonna go with that, Powan. Powan is my opponent, and he is playing as Calder. Now, this is not the same as Cartridge Calder. He has been nerfed in TinyWars. He's the only original CO who has been changed. With the exception of Tabitha, she's kind of been changed, but that's more or less because we fixed a bug that affected her in a certain way, but that's neither here nor there. I can go over that in a different video. So Calder's been nerfed. Instead of getting his crazy boost like he got in the original game, he now gets 25 offense and 25 defense for all units in the CO zone. And instead of getting plus 5 HP every turn, he only gets 2 HP every turn in the CO zone. And he still has no CO power, just like he did before. And also his zone radius is only 2. So he doesn't have a giant radius where he can give a crazy boost to his units and heal them every turn or anything. But his healing in his CO zones does still cost funds, just like it did before. So he has the same weakness as he did. But yeah, his staying power is pretty good. From that plus 2 HP within the CO zone. Plus 25-25 is nothing to sneeze at. Penny, on the other hand, all of her units are unaffected by weather, which is cool because Penny is the only CO in this game to have a global CO, like, day-to-day effect. Every other CO has to use their CO zone, but Penny, you don't even have to load her into a CO. All of her units get this effect. So that's pretty cool. And then, of course, when you change the weather, you don't need to worry about it because even if you get Fog of War with rain, you still get regular vision like you would in Fog of War, while your opponent has only the one vision for everything. Now, if you hear any weird sounds in the background, that's my cat in the closet scratching up the cardboard boxes that my PlayStation 2 is in. Alright. So I am player 2, I'm playing as the green units here, and Powan, my opponent, is playing red, so they will be going first. And one last thing before we start, my webcam is itty bitty high. That's because this map is kind of huge and I can't zoom it out any further than this, so that's what we're doing today. I hope it's not too terrible to look at my tiny little face in the corner right there. Alright, so oh, another thing I'm going to change. This is the amount of time between moves. It starts off pretty low, so I like to change that to 500. So let's get started. So Calder starts off his turn, of course, with a couple of infantry. Now, this is a map where you start with 5,000, so you can do 2 bikes, and that's what I choose to do. I'm going to go for this factory right away, whereas my opponent is going to take an extra turn to get to this factory. But this infantry opener is not necessarily a bad idea. It's going to slow down his capture game, but I believe my opponent is doing this in order to save some money so that he can rush out some like recons or tanks or things like that. You can see now he built some bikes. Meanwhile, I'm just going full on bikes here, using all of my income every turn. I'm going to send this bike up to the center. Now, this map is interesting because you have almost like 4 fronts. Like, you have the 2 fronts on each side here, but each of these sides kind of has 2 fronts in themselves, because you have this area here. Hold on, let me pause real quick. You have this area here, particularly with these 4 cities, that's contested, but then you also have this area down here, which is pretty well separated. There's a lot of bridges connecting the areas, but right around this area is where a lot of the conflict happens, and same on the other side as well, of course, because the map is mirrored in that way. But with all these wastelands and forests, it can be hard to switch a bunch of units to one side or the other. And with all of these rivers here, this spot right here with the bridges makes it pretty easy to front switch for this player. And more for this player, they can front switch here because you tend to be kind of like here and here, assuming you're the green player here, which is what I am. So that's why I'm saying that. But I can think sometimes, okay, you know. So the other thing to keep in mind is while you're doing battle on this front and this front, it's really hard to front switch between these two because there's all these mountains and meteors and fires in the way. So say you're fighting over here and you really need a tank to go over there. Well, you're almost better off just building a new one here and sending it off, because the alternative is having to send this all the way back here and then having to go through like the forest and then going all the way around. It takes almost as much time to front switch something that way as it would to just build something new on this factory. And you might be thinking, well, you can just send it around that way, right? Well, that's where your enemy is going to be. And on standard, especially on this map, it's kind of a choky map a little bit. So you tend to form defensive walls around here. So the chances of getting any unit, especially a tank, around here is pretty slim. You can't even send foot soldiers through the mountains here because these meteors are in the way. You have to go around no matter what. And the same thing for air units. They can't go over the meteors, they can't go over the fires. All of these tiles right here are impassable for everything. Now you could destroy the meteors if you really wanted to, but you're not likely to have time for that. Because you're going to be doing battle, you know, on the different fronts, and what are you going to do? Send artillery to the center just to shoot meteors? It's not really worth it. So front switching on this map is not really super viable a thing that you can do. So you will see that we start to build up some walls here. Now my opponent is starting to go full on bikes. I did a couple of infantry a few turns ago, but for the most part I'm still going bikes. I'm rushing these center contested properties. And I'm sending this infantry to cap this city next turn. I'm going to go for both these cities in the corners as well as some in the center because it's important to control all of these fronts. And here I go with the early recon. I want to be seeing if I can, excuse me, I want to see if I can harass some of my enemies' bikes and infantry. And I'm hoping that I can shoot 1 or 2 before he builds a tank. Now here, I was actually expecting my opponent to build a tank in response to my recon, either a tank or a recon of their own. But that didn't come out, so I was thinking to myself, okay, that's pretty good. That means my recon will probably be able to get a couple more pot shots off before it's forced to retreat. So I moved my recon all the way out here. These roads right here are really nice on this map because it lets you use tires pretty effectively. And here comes my first tank. I'm going to load Penny into this tank right here. And then I'm going to build a second tank behind it because you need to get that good tank layering. It's a very important concept in Advanced Wars, especially in PvP. Because you want to have them protected. Now here comes my opponent's tank. Now, I'm assuming my opponent is going to put Calder into that tank. It's not a... It's a pretty safe assumption, assuming they're not playing like Tasha or Waylon, like an air CO or something. Like those COs you might expect to see a CO battlecopter or something, but against Calder, yeah, a tank is pretty safe. So here comes Penny. She's in the CO tank, and here's my second tank, as I mentioned before. I did have to base skip for that tank, but if I hadn't base skipped, I wouldn't have been able to get the tank, and I really wanted to get that layering on them because I see an enemy tank coming that I expect to be a Calder tank. And there it is. So here it comes. It's coming towards the center, and I need to make sure I'm prepared for that. So the tanks are just going to be rolling out in a line. However, my opponent hasn't built any other vehicles. It's all just bikes and the few infantry that he had built at the beginning. So we continue our capture phase. I'd say in about 1 or 2 turns we're going to start fighting with our bikes and infantry. I have most of my cities already captured. My opponent has a few that he still needs to get to, but that's mostly a result of starting with infantry instead of bikes, so he got to his cities a little later than I did, but it doesn't really make a difference because I wasn't able to get there any faster to try and pressure those cities. Perhaps with the exception of this city right here in the bottom left corner. He doesn't have a lot there, and I have 3 bikes already, and I have my extra recon here that I can send down to start harassing, and here it is. The first of perhaps more than one. Let's just put it that way. This is an anti-tank, ladies and gentlemen. So, I'm building these tanks. You can see I built 2 tanks last turn because, okay, it's a Calder tank, I gotta deal with that. It's gonna heal HP, it's got a pretty hefty boost with that 25-25. Meanwhile, I just have my Penny CO zone with only plus 10 for everything, which, you know, it's a nice boost, but it's not a lot. So I said, okay, you know what, I'm going to put 2 tanks over here, and then I'll have some good tank advantage. I'll be able to gang up on this, and my opponent hasn't built any tanks up in the north, so I'm just going to build a recon here and start shooting at all these bikes and infantry. They won't be able to do much back, so that frees me up to pour a lot of my income into the bottom. My opponent sees this, and instead of trying to match my tank count, they build an anti-tank. Now, I don't blame my opponent for this decision. It is called an anti-tank after all. It makes sense. However, I don't think this was the smartest decision, and I'll let you guys see why as we continue this replay. So, I start moving out. You can see I'm starting to wall off right here. I'm using my bikes and foot soldiers to protect my valuable vehicles. I don't want to get shot by this Calder tank whatsoever. And I'm putting all of my bikes in lines like this so that it's harder for my opponent to get 2 shots off. Now, okay, this right here, I would say, is the first really big mistake that my opponent made. So, he attacks with his Calder tank. I have 2 tanks in range, one of which being my Penny tank. All I need to do is move this out of the way and I can shoot on this. And then I have this recon, this bike, I can send and shoot this. I can kill this, so that I can... In fact, I don't think I even need to, because this can swing around and shoot that. Now, if my opponent had another tank over here that they had built earlier, then they could have stopped me, essentially, from coming over here to try and shoot on this. Because, let's say it's over here, it would come and be able to shoot me from this city. But my opponent does not have a tank here. Instead, they built an anti-tank. And this anti-tank, as strong as anti-tanks are, one of their biggest weaknesses is their movement. They only have 4 movement points. And there are a lot of roads here, but anti-tanks are Tire B. Yeah, right here, Tire B. And if you check on planes, well, they're fine on planes, actually. So I'm... Tire B is actually better than Tire A. So I'm going to take back what I said about their movement. I mean, their movement is still pretty bad. 4 movement is not very much. Let's get that out of the way. Even with no terrain to hold them back, it's going to take them a while. Especially on a map this size, it's going to take it a while to get to the front lines. And meanwhile, I'm going to be just having a field day with my tanks, taking out his one CO tank. So, of course, he does take this out, but that's okay. Honestly, they were mostly there to wall off, and I'm going to be able to pick off his infantry and bikes in retaliation. This is another pretty obvious, like, throwing away your bike. My recon isn't in range, but... okay. Yeah, so I have this bike in range, this bike in range. I have this infantry in range. I can interrupt this capture, bring this recon up and attack this, and then it'll be in range to protect this city. So I'm not going to let him get this city, and even if he did get it, there's not very much backup coming, especially considering this recon is here, and he still hasn't built anything to answer it yet. It's still just a bunch of bikes. And you can shoot a recon with a bunch of bikes all you want, but it's not going to do that much. And with all of my cities that I own around here, I can just put it on a city, heal up what little damage they do, and then go back and start shooting again. So really what you want to do in this situation, you see a recon coming in during capture phase, all you have is bikes. You need something to answer it, whether a recon of your own or preferably a tank. Because if you build a tank to answer my recon, that forces me to build a tank of my own, or possibly a battlecopter. In this case, I built it just because I had the funds, and there wasn't much to answer it. But let's keep going here. The issue I'm seeing here is that there's just this tank and this anti-tank. Let's see what my opponent builds this turn. I'm curious to see. Another anti-tank. Very interesting decision. Now, it makes sense, okay? Once again, it is called an anti-tank, and look at all these tanks that I have. I have a huge tank advantage coming in right now. But these are going to take forever to get here, and by the time they can back up the front line, I'm going to have all kinds of bikes that can shoot on these, because these things are actually pretty weak to infantry and bike units in general. Like, they don't do a lot, 35, but if you can gang up on an anti-tank with them, they're extremely cost-effective. Because an anti-tank costs 11,000, a bike costs 2,500. It's just a very cost-effective trade. And I have a lot of those. And by the way, tanks can gang up on anti-tanks. They'll take a lot in retaliation, but the amount that they do back is, assuming you can gang up on them safely, you can deal with them with tanks. It's actually not too bad. Now you see here I interrupted this cap, and I fully intend to finish interrupting it with this recon next turn. And I was able to easily break through my opponent's wall on the northern front, and now I'm taking this city, which for all intents and purposes should have belonged to my opponent from the get-go. But now it's a neutral city on my opponent's side, more or less, and I'm taking it. So now, instead of retreating with this Calder tank, he chooses to fire on my Penny tank, which just basically guarantees that he's now about to lose his CO unit. Which for Calder is not as big a deal as for other COs, since he doesn't have a CO power that he needs to worry about. But you still don't want to lose your CO unit, because it's worth extra, because you have to pay half of the unit's cost to actually load in the first place. Plus, on the front lines, this CO zone where you get the free healing is just so valuable for Calder. Using that CO zone to good effect is really what Calder's playstyle is all about. And now I have a third tank that's in range, and all of these units here are just going to destroy all of these units, and I'm going to be getting free charge on my CO. So you'll see here, also down here he has a bit of an advantage with these bikes. I believe I'm going to take this bike and send it down to reinforce. Meanwhile, up on the northern front, there is a pretty decent battle going on. He actually built a flare to deal with my recon earlier, but I answered that immediately by building a tank. Like, okay, recon can't really deal with a flare that well. He built a second flare, but I've already built a tank, so we'll see how well that works out. So I send my recon down. This Calder tank is going to die for sure. There it goes. And meanwhile, I'm going to be going around getting a bunch of damage. I'm already at 33. My CO zone is at 4, which is massive. At this point, I'm almost guaranteed. First of all, I've won this front completely, okay? Let's stop and take a look for a second. 1 HP infantry, 9 HP infantry. Full HP bike, full HP infantry. And down here, these two foot soldier units are being threatened by a recon. They can't do anything against that. Up here, there are 4 tanks, an artillery, a 5th tank coming in, a battlecopter. Like, there's nowhere these infantry can possibly go. They are going to die. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And meanwhile, these anti-tanks, they're still just plodding their way along down to the front lines, moseying down like grit, taking their sweet old time. Now, they're good against tanks. Once they get here, they're going to be a bit of an issue. But as it stands now, this whole front, like, I've won it. It's completely mine. I can start going after cities. I can take this city and that city. I can go after this city. And it's just not a very good position for my opponent whatsoever. Now, up here it's looking a little better with all these bikes incoming, but I have a tank incoming against my opponent's flares. I saw this battlecopter expecting it to come over to the northern flank here, and so I built an anti-air right here. We'll see where my opponent does end up sending that, because I didn't want this. That was a good counter to my tank, so it kind of forced me to build an anti-air. However, it goes south. Now, my opponent could still choose to send it to the east from here to sort of support up here. And finally, here comes another tank. But not before the third anti-tank, ladies and gentlemen. There are now 3 anti-tanks on the field, which my opponent has used to respond to a take advantage that I have on one of the fronts. I now have 5 tanks and 1 medium tank that I built last turn. Anti-tanks, not necessarily going to beat that because of my extra, like, I have this artillery, I have a second artillery backing me up, I have bikes that I can use. Now here, finally something comes in. Anti-tanks, by the way, for those of you who don't know, are surprisingly pretty good against battlecopters. They do 45, and battlecopters only do 20 damage back, which is pitiful. Like, it's not called an anti-copter, okay? Why does it do so little? Even tanks do more. It's called an anti-tank, and it does 35, whereas the copter only does 20. And it does a ton more damage to the tank, so fair enough. But still, it's a bad trade even for a battlecopter. Even a duster, which a duster you might think is pretty good since the bikes, the infantry, they use the machine guns, and they're really good against it. But the duster with the same machine gun, only 5%. Well, who knows? Advanced Wars logic. Alright, so here comes the first flare. I'm actually kind of in danger up here. Kind of. I have a tank that can just go up there and have a field day. At least until this tank gets here, but that's going to take a couple of turns to get there. And in the meantime, I am just throwing everything into the bottom flank here. Because I'm like, okay, well, I can easily win this front. I'll just send my skeleton crew to the weak side over here. I'll build a second tank to deal with this tank just in case. And and I'll reinforce maybe with some more bikes so I can capture the properties. I'm probably going to lose some of these properties now, but I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll just send my bikes and stuff, or rather my tanks, sorry, and my recons. I can just clean up all of those weak units my opponent has around, build a third tank, you know, build another battlecopter. It'll be fine. So yeah, now I am losing some of these properties up here, as you can see. I can't interrupt all of these. But that's fine. I'm just going to let my opponent do that for now, because I expect I'll be able to get those back. In come the anti-tanks, which I can easily just move out of range of, although they are covering each other. And here comes a Calder anti-tank. He decided to load himself into this, which is honestly kind of scary. Like, it's going to be very hard to kill, but yeah, they're kind of hard to counter when they're clumped up like this, but at the same time, once again, remember that there's not much they can do without that direct support from, like, tanks and such. The fourth anti-tank, ladies and gentlemen. The fourth anti-tank. We need more anti-tanks. So here the battlecopter does end up going south. Meanwhile, I sent my anti-air over to the southwestern flank to deal with it. And I also have this battlecopter, so I'm thinking, well, maybe, like, if he wants to attack one of my tanks, then he'll have to deal with, well, my anti-air cannot, well, yeah, it can get down there as long as I move one of my tanks. If it wants to attack one of my tanks, I can shoot it with my anti-air, I can shoot it with my battlecopter. So there's not too much it can do. If it wants to shoot one of these bikes or the recon, then I can shoot it in retaliation with my battlecopter. So yeah, it does force it back. Meanwhile, my opponent continues inching forward with these anti-tanks. But I've already built, I've got artillery behind that can shoot them cost effectively. I've got a rocket that can zone them out in return. I'm building a bunch of bikes, as you can see here, to do a lot of damage. Now this up here looks pretty bad with all of the enemy units until you realize that they have one tank to my two. Which, by the way, I went and interrupted this cap knowing that it was in range of this tank. But that's why it's important to have tank overlap. So now I can move this tank back, presumably interrupt this cap, or I can try to destroy this and then move it onto the city to heal up, and then this can roll right in and take a nice shot on this tank. And my opponent does not have another tank overlapping his tank to punish that move. His tank is all the way back here. It's like 2 turns away. So yeah, here we go. I do interrupt the cap, and bam! There it is. That's a 3 HP tank. It's not going to be doing too much damage to anything anytime soon. Maybe this recon, you know, good luck with that. And meanwhile, I'm going to be sending a few little bikes up top, so that I can recapture these properties up here once I'm finished cleaning up. Meanwhile, I'm just building up my walls. You want to come at me with 5 anti-tanks? 5 now? And a single regular tank? That's fine. I'll just zone you out with rockets, I'll zone you out with bikes, and we can just sit here all day. And I'll build more rockets, I'll build more bikes. Eventually I'll build a bomber, you know, something like that. Because I do have an income advantage. Let's see here. Right now it is, here it is, 22 for my opponent versus 21 for me. Now that's because my opponent is capturing some of these cities up here. I will shortly be taking these back. This one I'm going to lose, but I've spent so many turns having an advantage. Plus there's also this city that my opponent does not have. And just my positional advantage here compared to, I have 5 anti-tanks and 2 more that will be here in, what, 3 turns? So just my positional advantage that I've built up over the course of the game thus far outweighs the income advantage that my opponent is going to be allowed for just a few turns here. Although, smartly, he does attack my bike down here so that it can't quickly capture this city. But regardless of that, I can just start capping it, and then I'm going to block it off. Oh, and I'm also going to start capping this city, because why not? He'll have to send something to deal with it. And that'll get one of these units off my back over here on the wall. And here comes a bike. Hey, I'm going to shoot your anti-tank with a bike. Here comes another bike and another bike. We're going to shoot your anti-tanks. What are you going to do about it? Let's see. And meanwhile, my tanks, I have 3 tanks up here now versus my opponent's 1. No anti-tanks to be seen, just 1 tank. And I think 3 tanks will be able to deal with that. You know, that's just a guess though. Alright, so 5 anti-tanks. What is he going to build next? A bomber. He's going to build a bomber, ladies and gentlemen. Now, at this point, I only have the 1 anti-air. So, against a bomber, okay. I'll have to build another anti-air. Also, I have a battlecopter up on the northern flank now. You need an anti-air, okay? Or a battlecopter of your own up here at the very least. Because this thing is going to be wreaking havoc. Yes, it is. Meanwhile, this, I don't remember if I send... Yeah, okay, I send my tank down. Basically just throwing away that bike because I had a bunch of units that were in range to interrupt that. Like, if you're going to go for a capture, at least make sure you're not just going to die for it. Like, in a way... You might be thinking, okay, well, I'm going to go for this, and then he has to send a unit down here to deal with it. But I have so many units right here that I could have used to deal with it that aren't really doing anything but being a wall, waiting for my rockets to get here so I can zone out your anti-tanks. And as soon as they get here to zone out the anti-tanks, it's over. Like, they'll have to just slowly push back, push back. I can start taking these cities. I already took this city. Let's see, we're even right now, and I expect to be able to start taking some of these cities soon, and I'm also going to expect to take some of these cities back from my opponent. And now, here we go, the first rocket is in range. It can shoot on the CO anti-tank, which will force my opponent to move back a little bit. Oh, why is there a loading thing on my mouse? Oh, and I decided, you know what, I'll build a bomber too. Those are good against anti-tanks. And then here's an anti-air. I built it up here just in case he sends the bomber up north. But if he doesn't, I'll just send it over the bridge and move it over here. No big deal. Alright, so he does get forced to send his anti-tank back. He sends the bomber down. He's realizing that the anti-tanks are not enough. He needs something to deal with this big death ball that I've built up down here. And the anti-tanks are not going to cut it, because now there are rockets. I'm just going to slowly inch them forward. And meanwhile, I'm going to protect my anti-air so that if he wants to shoot me with the bomber, he's going to have to pay for the privilege. At the cost of 20,000 being killed by a 7,000 unit, in terms of cost, that is. Meanwhile, look at all these caps that I'm just going to interrupt. Like, he's throwing away these units. Look at all these tanks that I have, battlecopters, and yet he's still going for these captures. These are all just useless units right now. Like, they're worth nothing. They're not going to capture any properties because I have 100,000 units in range to interrupt all of them. They're all just going to die. So at this point, he really needed to just pull back, wall up, start building some tanks over here. So it's very important to have tank advantage. Tank advantage is very important, as you will see. Now, let's see here. I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm still not quite at full energy. Yeah, I'm at 42 energy right now. It's because it's been so stally. There haven't been a bunch of like bikes and stuff for me to take advantage of to try and gain power charge. But that's okay. And here, the bomber just joins my opponent's death ball. It's not much of a death ball because there's only a bunch of indirect units. By the way, second bomber, but by the way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 anti-tanks. You know, that's honestly, at this point, I was a little bit unsure what to do. I had asked in the Discord, so what do you do when somebody spams anti-tanks? And the people in the Discord, it was kind of funny. Some of them were like, what do you mean spamming anti-tanks? Who does that? And I was like, well, I may or may not be fighting someone who's really spamming anti-tanks. And so they were like, well, just build rockets. Build a bunch of bikes, and you can see how many bikes I have. But when they're all clumped together like this, it's like, it's going to be hard to take good trades against these, I think, because they're all clumped together. You know, as soon as you try to gang up on one, because you really have to gang up on these. Like, they have crazy defense. Rockets, like other indirect units, do well. Which, rockets are the only thing I can realistically get in range against all of these since they're clumped together. And then bombers, which do 80, which is why I've built 2 of those now. Or have I? Here's the one. No, my opponent built 2, I just built my first one. But, you know, there's no anti-air to be seen. There's one duster that decided to go north to deal with my battlecopter. So I'm like, you know what, if it goes south, I'll just use all of my anti-air that I have. I built another anti-air. So, you know, I'm going to be fine. Because as soon as I see, that's the beauty of Standard. You can see exactly what your opponent builds, and you say, oh, okay, that's going to be a nuisance to deal with, so I better build an answer right away so I can send that up to deal with it. Meanwhile, remember just a couple turns ago how many units were up here? There was just a swarm of bikes. How many bikes are left? There's 2 bikes. So a few more are incoming, and meanwhile I have now 4 tanks. One is pretty damaged, but it can deal with bikes just fine. I can rest it on a city. I have 2 anti-air, which were also very indispensable with dealing with bikes. Meanwhile, my battlecopter is also done well. It's at level 2. I do have to get it away from this duster, though. So, the duster is a bit of a threat there. But right now, I mean, how do you think my opponent's going to win this at this point? I just keep zoning him out with my rockets. He has to slowly move back. Remember when he was around here-ish? Now he's been pushed back just a little bit. Here, my rockets are zoning him out. He has to move back, and now he's back here. And this city is pretty much free for the taking. Almost. I just need to move up a little further with my rockets. And then this bike can swoop right in, take that city, basically for free. And meanwhile, I'm going to need another anti-air down here. I'm not sure why I don't already have a second anti-air since I saw this second bomber. And also, the duster decided to come down here, and there's another duster coming in. Not sure what the thought process was behind second duster. There wasn't really too much... Pardon me, there wasn't really too much down here except maybe all of these bikes that a duster can really deal with. But in any case, we're sending more tanks up to the north because there's a skeleton crew on my opponent's side. Honestly, this is my skeleton crew that I've slowly amassed over the course of the battles against all of the bikes. It's just I haven't been losing units because it's all been bikes. There haven't been any tanks to threaten me. And meanwhile, I continue to be careful with all of my units. I have to move that guy out of the way. And now, instead of being here with the anti-tanks, now they're all the way back here. And my opponent gets aggressive. Here come the bombers. And unfortunately for me, my anti-air is not in range, so that was definitely a blunder on my part. I really should have sent more anti-air over there in the first place. You know when a copter has been really useful, by the way? When it's running out of fuel. It's beautiful. I mean, it hasn't killed anything. It doesn't have any promotions, but, you know, it's been used to zone things out. It's it's been good. It's been good. At this point, I actually build a rig, because I want to build a temporary airport, because the longer I'm sitting around with all these units just sitting around, they're still using up fuel, because air units just be like that. So, I didn't have much else to build. I decided to build a fighter, because, you know, 2 bombers, 2 dusters. My opponent actually does see this and build a fighter in response. One of the first times he built something immediately in response to something that I built, which was a good play on his part. But now I've gotten wise. I'm sending 1, 2, 3 anti-airs down here. I've got a fighter. So this one fighter down here is kind of a little bit too little too late, and now you can see I'm going in for the big push. Even my medium tank right here is low on fuel. It's got 17 fuel, ladies and gentlemen. This medium tank has been a trooper. Man, just a lot of these, and this anti-air also running low on fuel. It's not often that you see that. Just ground units like this running low on fuel, because they've been doing such an efficient job at walling off and zoning out the opponent. And now finally it's all coming to fruition. If my opponent wants to shoot any of these... Ooh, he opened that up. Now, this did suck. I knew this was going to happen, though. He's going to shoot one of my rockets, but I still have another. And I have 2 anti-airs right here. I have a fighter right here. He sees that I'm pushing, and he decides, okay, well, I've got to push too. This is a classic mistake. Do not do this. Like, you feel like you need to do something. Like, okay, my opponent's pushing. Now it's time for me to push. But in this case, you don't have the units to push. That's why I did my push in the first place. I figured, okay, if I push now, I'm going to come out ahead. And here comes my first CO power! Finally, it took long enough. Unfortunately, I did not get rain. Which, you know, most people would be ecstatic to see this, because I got sandstorm. That's by far the best weather that Penny can roll. But I'm pretty sad about it, because this series is not called ruining the standard ladder by getting overpowered sandstorms. This is called ruining the standard ranking ladder by using Penny to get Fog of War. I want to make every match Fog of War, and this is not Fog of War. This is Sandstorm. But at least I get to say it's kind of an outdated meme by now, but you know, you guys know what I'm talking about. So now the carnage, baby. Look, 2 bombers down, 1 duster down. I killed at least 1 anti-tank earlier. That means he must have built at least 6 anti-tanks total. I don't have anything to shoot this fighter, but it doesn't matter, because I have stuff blocking off my fighter and my bomber. This thing only has 3 HP. I don't care if he kills it, because I have a bunch of anti-air here. Meanwhile, I'm just moving up all of my indirects. I left this one exposed partially on purpose, because, I mean, what is he going to do? He has an infantry that can shoot it. 1 infantry. It's not going to do much, and even if it does, look at all these things that I have here. I'll just shoot it down. I don't really care if I leave it a little exposed this turn, because there's not much my opponent can do. What is he going to do? Move these anti-tanks over? They're slow. They can't do much. So, at this point, I've pretty much already won. I'm expecting my opponent to resign soon. But have you ever played an opponent where you're just sure, you know, fit as a fiddle, you've definitely won, but they just keep playing, and they play another turn, and then they play another turn? Those are the people who I call the fight to the last players. They're the players who will wait for you to come in and actually cap their HQ in the very far corner of the map and never resign, because they played a lot of Advance Wars on the Game Boy Advance and the AI never resigns. That's what I think this player was on this game, because it took quite a while for me to finally clean this up. And to be fair, look at all the anti-tanks that are still here. But now I'm starting to clean those up too, because I've taken out a couple of them now. I've got a bomber here. They can move this out of the way and shoot it with this 3 HP fighter. That'll suck. Meanwhile, this is built a temporary airport, so if I want to, I can just send it over to get heals. And yeah. Oh, and now, as you can see, I'm starting to recap my properties like I said I would. Now, let's take a look here. I'm a property ahead. You know, that's great. Let's take a look at the unit count. Let's see. My opponent has 19 units at 9,100 value. Over here... Oh my, that's 39 units at... What is that? 200,000? Oh my. I think I'm only just a slightly bit ahead. So my opponent's reaction to what's going on down here is to build a third bomber. Which, you know, it's not like I have 2 anti-air and a fighter already down here to deal with that or anything. I think it'll work. I don't know if I'll be able to come back from that one. Oh man, look at that. I just... all that damage on that tank. It sure would be a shame if I had a fighter in range of that bomber right there. Certainly would be. Especially if he didn't wall it off with all those infantry. I mean, there's a fighter here. But, let's see. Where are my anti-air? Oh, they're both down here. That's why. But still, I mean, there's a fighter in range. I'll go shoot it. I don't mind. I'm back up to 34 energy. I'm probably going to get another CO power at this rate. Meanwhile, I continue capping more of my opponent's properties up north. He's just completely given up. He's sending everything down south and letting me have the north completely. There's nothing up here. I'm sending units deep into enemy territory. If only I had more bikes, which, I mean, I finally built a bunch more because I need to cap these properties. Finally, I start capping this property right here because there are no longer any anti-tanks in range to zone it out. I put this guy in range of the anti-tank because who cares? This rocket is zoning it out. If it wants to shoot my tank, I'll just shoot it back with my rocket. It doesn't make much of a difference. And I start capping this with a 5 HP bike because there's just nothing in range to stop it. What are they going to do? So this continues on for a few turns. Eventually I will get rid of these anti-tanks. I mean, I have to admit, these anti-tanks lasted a long time. Like, it was very, very hard to kill these anti-tanks. It took a very long time to get rid of them, especially considering the Calder boost. They kept on getting healed back up. He was utilizing the rivers and such to pretty good advantage. Ah, the sandstorm has ended. I have 60 energy. Let's see what weather we get next. I spent a long time practicing those lyrics in preparation for this video, you guys. I went into karaoke and I was practicing Deluge Sandstorm. You know, I was singing it in the shower, practicing those lyrics so that you all would be proud of me. Check this out. This bomber is at 1 HP, 9 real health. It's got 24 fuel and 2 shots left. Oh my gosh. Beautiful cost-effective bomber right here. Beautiful cost-effective bomber. Same with this. It's at level 2. It's got 2 shots left. It's got 24 fuel. So many of my units have just had insane cost-effectiveness. I've shot down 3 bombers now. And it's just a sight to behold. Hi, Reggie. Here's my dog, Reggie. And, oh, now he's leaving again. All right, you saw him on camera for a sec there. Oh, well, everyone say hi to Sir Archibald Reginald III. That's Reggie. He's having trouble getting out of the room. Okay, I'm recording a video, so you can stay in here, but I'll pet you after I finish the video. Okay, don't bark at the cat. The cat is in the closet, and the dog is always sniffing at it. Alright, so you can see how far back I've pushed my opponent. I'm just taking all of his cities. It's over now. There are 2 anti-tanks left. He built another bomber. You know, you'd think that after it didn't work the first time, he might try something different, but, you know, Why not? I'm surprised he can afford a bomber every turn at this point. So, I shoot the bomber on... That is a veteran bomber, to his credit. Hi, Reggie. Reggie, I'm finishing a video. Go see Mom. Go to Mom. He's so cute. I love him. We got him about a month ago or so. He's great. There are pictures of him somewhere. I forget where I put them. Maybe on my Instagram or something. I do have an Instagram. I just don't advertise it because it's not like something I consider part of my channel. So yeah, at this point, like, I'm almost going to get the HQ. Oh, by the way, I have 60 energy again. So next turn, I can use my power again, and we'll see what weather I get. So, you know, still playing. Still playing. You gotta hand it to him. He's tenacious, this Powin folk. So let's see what weather we get next turn. What could it be? Come on, use the power. I'm just busy, like, okay, I'm finally gonna kill all these anti-tanks. They're gone. Good, and we're gonna cap all the properties with rock and roll. Oh, beautiful. Cap all the properties. Alright, use the CO power. Come on, Buster. Come on, past Buster. Use it. What do we get? Maybe I'm gonna hold on to it for a turn to wait for the sandstorm to subside or something. I don't know why I would do that. I'm expecting my opponent to resign at any instant now. Come on, use it. Yes, there it is. And finally the rain! We ruined the standard ladder with rain, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the reason the fog doesn't appear to show up, it's actually here. The moment I activated that, the fog activated for my opponent. It's just that because of the fog mechanics of this game, every tile that you have vision on at the start, or it's like when you move your recon, you know, you do a sweep, and then if you move past, say, this tile right here, this city, if you start here and you move up there, you'll get vision on this because you passed by it. Hi, Reggie! You need to go outside. Go outside with Mom. He's such a good boy. But yeah, because I had full vision on the entire map at the start of the turn, then as soon as the fog rolls in, I just keep that vision, because it's like I did a recon sweep on the entire map, if that makes sense. But from my opponent's perspective, you can see he gets the fog right away. It's just that I can see everything, because I'm Penny, and I'm not affected by it. Well, the fog does roll in for me, but it doesn't take effect until next turn because I already had vision on everything. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's how it works. The turn the fog rolls in for Penny, she just gets to see everything. So yeah, now you can see all the buildings went dark for a second there. And instead of resigning, he ran out of time, which that's one way to win. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. My very first standard ranked game attempting to ruin the entire thing by turning it into a Fog of War game using Penny. So, very interesting first game. It was a lot of fun to play, actually. Those, that big clump of anti-tanks was very annoying to deal with. It did force me to build, like, a bunch of rockets and, bombers and stuff, mostly just to zone them out, because I would get in range and then they'd get pushed back and back and back, but then eventually it's just like, alright, I'm gonna just cap all your properties that you left exposed because you were forced to move all of your anti-tanks back thanks to these rockets. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I plan to continue doing more replay commentaries of my games played as Penny in the standard ranking ladder on TinyWars.online. As always, there's links in the description to play Tiny Wars and also to join the Tiny Wars Discord. It's also my own Discord. So, with that, please remember to leave a like if you liked this episode, and don't forget to subscribe before you go for more Penny action. But until next time, goodbye everyone. It's nighttime.